In addition to the rainfall factor that we have seen, what else affects land use and settlement? Major river valleys transform both the north and the south. The Tigris and the Euphrates rivers originate in the north's mountains. They flow south, bringing both water and soil to the otherwise arid plains of Mesopotamia, and then turn southeast to the Persian Gulf. City-states and empires arose along these rivers from the region of Aram through the Assyrian homeland to Babylon and the river deltas, which now extend far beyond their ancient limits. Here, with the literary texts of Sumer, history began, at the foot of the mountainous north, but also on the edge of the Arabian desert. By contrast, arid regions in the south lack political potential. But how then did Egypt arise and thrive in the arid south? The Nile River flows north from Africa's interior and provides a long, narrow, verdant strip through the Sahara. Political centers emerged along the Nile, one at Luxor, or Thebes, in Upper Egypt, supported by the sheer immensity of the Nile, with its ceaseless water flowing through vast deserts. The annual rising and falling of the Nile left deposits of fertile soil along its narrow valley where agriculture and wildlife flourished. These mountains along the west bank of the valley protected the famous Valley of the Kings. Here some of Egypt's greatest pharaohs were buried with all that was thought necessary in afterlife. From these heights one gains a view in the opposite direction, over the west bank and its ancient structures to the river Nile and to temples which stood in timeless dignity along its east bank. The impressive facade of the Luxor temple allows entrance into a maze of columns and polished statues. A few minutes to the north is the Karnak temple, where one can roam among massive columns in the hypostyle hall in front of the central court and sanctuary. As the Nile continues its journey north through the desert and toward the Mediterranean, it arrives at another major center, the area of Memphis in Lower Egypt. Here Egypt's old kingdom emerged over 45 centuries ago, and grand funerary pyramids arose in the sands along the Nile Valley. Nearby, the vigilant Sphinx, protective of this early Egyptian empire, still raises his head in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, as it has through all subsequent periods. The Nile's journey, however, does not end here. It divides into numerous streams. Its flow slows, and its waters deposit rich soils over an ever-increasing delta where fields, palms, ponds, and moderate climate all combine to create one of the world's most concentrated agricultural regions. Desert sand, however, is never far away, and its incessant encroachment appears along many fields and from various vistas above the delta floor. Were it not for the Nile, fed by the waters of the African interior, these surrounding sands would have long ago engulfed the Nile Valley and this broad delta. Nothing compares to the Nile in the midst of sprawling deserts. And nothing, in either north or south, compares to Egypt's empires which began along the banks of the Nile, strong, rich, and secure within their inhospitable surroundings. So how did Egypt affect ancient Near Eastern policies and politics? Like powers in Mesopotamia, Egypt's kingdoms changed the course of history through empire-building campaigns. Pharaohs recorded these campaigns on stone inscriptions along the Nile. This relief on the southern wall of the Karnak temple celebrates victories in the land between by Pharaoh Shishak, founder of Egypt's 22nd dynasty. The god Amun, identified by his double-plumed headdress, holds the ropes of captive cities in his left hand while Asiatics kneel before him with hands raised in supplication. The biblical book of Kings tells us that Shishak's campaign occurred soon after the time of King Solomon and his wealth-gathering reign. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Solomon's son, Shishak, king of Egypt, advanced against Jerusalem. He took the treasures of the Lord's temple and the treasures of the king's palace. All of it he took. The inscription traces the Egyptian advance through Gaza on the coast, then inland via Gezer and past the lowland cities of Rebute and Ayalon, to access the Kirithaim and Beit Horon ridge routes, which brought the Egyptian forces to Gibeon on Jerusalem's doorstep. The rest of Shishak's city list reveals his main goals: to destroy the infrastructure built by David and Solomon, a network of sites that had deflected east-west trade away from Egypt, and to reassert Egyptian influence northward to the region of Aram. A question arises: how did the armies of imperial Egypt reach these northern regions? The lands along the eastern Mediterranean offered an impressive land bridge to the region of Aram and the powers of Mesopotamia beyond. Great natural barriers defined the land bridge: the Mediterranean Sea to the west, a barrier for all but sailors who exploited its sea lanes as maritime highways, and the Arabian Desert to the east, open only to caravan drivers who learned to navigate its arid paths. The land of the Bible lies between these barriers. It also lies uncomfortably between Egypt and Aram. Specific passageways lead through this land between. What defines these passageways? Geological tension along the land bridge produces areas of difficulty: Lebanon's high ranges, Upper Galilee, obstacles in the Galilean Depression, the Central Hill Country, Upper Gilead and the Dead Sea region, the Southern Highlands, and the arid South. These difficulties define passageways or imperial highways which link the region of Aram and adjacent powers in Mesopotamia with Egypt in the Nile Valley beyond the northern Sinai Desert. Egypt claimed this middle ground for economic and security reasons, even though it lay beyond northern Sinai. Much of the area, however, was part of the watered and settled north, and northern powers often overran it. So what was life like along these imperial highways? Those living in this land between, the land of the Bible, were caught between two far greater power centers, often in conflict for control of this middle ground. Only when the imperial powers waned or retreated could local nations in this land between emerge and compete.